Okay, just a reminder that in this class on March 15, the next speech, the informative speech, is due, and you can find a description of it. I'll share a couple of thoughts about it coming up on page 4. The latter part of page 4 in the syllabus is a short description. Let me explain a couple of things just that will help you. You are responsible to, 1, give thought to a topic that you would like to speak on, where you can inform us. 2, it's important for you to do some research on this topic to expand your knowledge. 3, it's important for you then to put the speech together, making sure you in the structure of your own speech, however you wish to do it, having the introduction with the 5 functions of an introduction, the body of the speech where you might have 2 or 3 key things you're going to talk about, and then the conclusion where you have the 4 functions of the conclusion. I will be sending out probably this weekend to everybody a copy of the evaluation form electronically that I will be using. Hang on to that evaluation. Here are the reasons. 1, you can study it in preparing your speech. 2, you'll see again, everything we're covering in class is, most everything is on that evaluation form. 3, in the final exam that you're going to be doing, you will be evaluating a speech on YouTube that I will send you the link to. And not everybody's going to get the same speech. I have different speeches. And so you will get a speech. It's about 7-8 minutes, that time frames, relatively similar to this class. In fact, they are former students in this class who have agreed to let their speech be used as something that you evaluate. So you will be able to use this form. Now, I don't want you to send me that form. What I want you to do is to use it, and you can check off your scores on each of the areas, and then you can write your speech based on that and the rationale for why you say what you are saying in regard to the speech of the person that you're evaluating. Nobody sees this but me, so I read it, and I'm reading it for quality of evaluation, accuracy, and the quality of evaluation, and quality of in way that you're able to defend your position regarding the speech. So this evaluation form that you're going to get, it'll help you see how I will be evaluating. It's a check off, 30 areas that I'll check off on your speech. And then by doing that, you'll begin to get a good feel for this, because I'll send it back to you, the evaluation form, and you will see how you can use this then in the final exam. You don't send that to me though, you send me the essay, but we'll explain that further. So I want you just to hear that's coming. So I will be getting that form out to all of you, and that's coming up as we start getting ready for the next speech that's going to be given. I remind you that normally when we have these speeches, like in the class, when we are together in a class, that it usually, for both sets of speeches, it takes at least 3 days, 3 sessions per day, 3 sessions per speech, and sometimes a little bit more. But but when you give it, you have to hand me the speech in on the 15th of March, but we don't meet that week like we did the last time, because I'm meeting with you, not personally, but watching your speech. So I need that time for that. Normally we'd do this in the classroom, and I would be evaluating. I'd literally have that evaluation form, and I would be evaluating your speech as you're giving it, and then I would not hand you the evaluation form to the next class session. But because of COVID-19, because we're doing classes this way, this is how we do it. And that's why we don't meet. It's not, you're not getting less, you're not getting cheated out of more material, because when we have speeches, I'm not handing out more material during that time at all. So just to help you understand what's coming down the track in regard to that. Now we're going to deal with a topic. I've switched things around a little bit because I wanted to get to this topic before you do your next speech. And it's on self-talk and traps to self-talk, and we'll be looking at that in just a few moments. But I'm going to ask you a series of questions, not for discussion. I just want you to think about this. You might even write some of this down and think about this because it's important. Self-talk is critical, so we need to think about factors that impact that. So first question I have is actually two questions that go together. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning very high and 1 meaning very low. Right now, as we're now in March, how is COVID-19 impacting you? If you were to have to put a number down between 1 and 10, a 1 meaning hardly at all, maybe not at all, a 10 meaning as high as you could possibly imagine. It has its stress. Now I'm going to give you my number. I'm not going to ask you for your numbers. I just want you to think about this, and you might even want to write down a piece of paper and then ponder it for a moment. So first question was, right now, how is COVID-19 impacting you? Okay, and I'll come back to my answer in a moment. The second question is, what is one thing you can do to lessen the pressure and to raise, not to raise, but to lower that number? So if it's at a 10, what can I do to bring it down to 8 or a 7? If it's at a 7, what can I do to bring it down to a 5? That idea. So let me just explain a little bit about my journey. Like you, COVID's been happening for around just over a year now. And a year ago, I was now beginning to realize that there was something very serious going on in the world, and that it was visiting all parts of the world. And I realized that likelihood is that we may have to shift how we do teaching as far as when and where, etc. A year ago right now, my classes were held in a classroom. I was in the classroom with my students at the Trinity Western campus. I think it was on the 11th of, I'm just looking at my calendar here. I think it was on, and I'm just going to check it right now, on the 11th of March. On the 11th of March was my last day in the classroom. On the 11th of March of last year was the last time I was on the Trinity Western campus. And as you can see that today, it is March 3. And that 1 week and 1 day, so a week tomorrow, it will be 1 year since I've been on the Trinity Western campus at all. And so I've been dealing, like you, with this whole journey. And, the first day, it was stressful at the beginning because I had to shift literally in the middle of one of my all my classes to online and begin to learn. And I'm still learning. And there's some things that I'm starting to realize I could do more in regard to interaction. But I have found this very frustrating. But it's been a whole year since I've been in the classroom with students. I'm talking about an actual classroom, not a virtual classroom. But I dealt with the stress fairly well, and I still was stressed by it and felt the stress in the fall. As I realized the whole semester, at least, and probably the whole year, I'm going to be doing teaching this way. And this is strange. This is different. I literally finished a class, had a short break, was downstairs just now talking to Joanne, and I said, my body is physically sore, more sore sitting and teaching this way than in the classroom. This is very frustrating, but it's a reality, but it's stressful. And I said that I have felt more stress as time went on. Actually, I was doing fairly well, and then about 2 weeks ago, I quote hit the wall. All of a sudden, I was so exhausted and tired, and I was trying to understand why. Well, it's the reality of the stress of COVID-19 as a major part. There are other things going on too. The American election, because I was born in the States, took energy out of me in the big picture. And other factors come into play and have been very stressful. And I'm not just speaking for myself. I know that you have been in some level experiencing stress. So I thought about that on the scale of 1 to 10. Where would I put myself right now? And I said, in the last class hour, I wrote down the number 8, and probably it's between 8 and 9, to be honest with you. I don't mean what I mean is I'm just weary of this, and it's stressful. Um, I'm not used to having to stay in my home all day. Do you know that in about the third way through December, about December 10, somewhere in that time frame, I filled my car with gas. Okay, I'm not hardly driving anywhere. I still drive a little bit. Last week on the weekend, um, I'm not sure what day it was. I think it was Friday. I filled my car up for the first time since that about the 10th or 11th of December. That's how little driving I've been doing. And I'm not used to that at all. And so I have felt the stress of being in this home. Now I get out, I go for walks. I walk, as I think I mentioned to you, my goal is to walk 6,000 kilometers a year. And I have virtually done that for a number of years. I can't remember exactly the number of years. I don't have my material here to check it out, but this is, I think, my 6th year. And what I mean by 6th year is that come May 16, I started another year. That's when it started. It was May 16, and I know how many kilometers every day since. And I have an objective to walk 16.44 average, 16.44 kilometers a day. And I've been doing that for going on 6 days. So this has been one of my ways to kind of try to help keep me mentally and physically healthy. So I thought about that, and my number has climbed substantially over the last, I would say, um, 2 weeks. And I'm feeling the effects of it. The other question I'd ask is right now, what is your number? I'd say, what are you doing? What is one thing you're doing to lessen the pressure and to raise or to lower that number? For me, walking has always been there. But one thing I've been doing, and I'm suggesting that I'm sure all of you are getting COVID tired. I'm sure you're getting tired of Zoom. I am. And one thing I do now that really does help me is to stop and realize that there are now vaccines out there, and they're starting to happen slowly, but they are happening. In fact, if you're from the United States, I heard, I think it was yesterday, that the Americans are slowly becoming the leaders of getting the vaccine to the people. The new president said he wanted 100 million people in the first 30 days. I think it was, or 100 million people in the first 100 days. I think that's what it was. Well, they're doing more than that per day now. They're doing 130 or so, I forget, 130,000 people on a day, roughly a day per day basis. So that means that they're going much faster. Well, that's helping everywhere else because many other countries are doing well. Canada's a little bit slower, but they are getting it. And okay, so what I have been doing that really helps me is saying to myself, it's happening. We have a vaccine. We're slowly getting vaccinated. We're getting this dealt with. More and more people, and yeah, and the numbers have been coming down. Now the variants that they're dealing with could come and make a mess of this, and so they're trying to get more and more people vaccinated. In fact, yesterday on BCTV News, they were saying with the new processing and that they're using, etc., that they're now thinking that June, July, everybody in British Columbia could be vaccinated. Okay, now they were saying September onward. Now they're starting to bring that down. So more and more it's happening. And I keep reminding myself, it is happening. Like the goal is in sight now. We are getting there slowly, yes, but now we're actually getting there. We actually have another vaccine that's coming in, Johnson & Johnson. We've got 3 now coming out, 2. We're doing a 3rd one coming up, and now Johnson & Johnson's almost ready to start as a vaccine. There's good things happening. So I talk to myself and say, this is coming to an end. This is something happening. And last night I was talking to Joanne and said, there's a tradition that we have in August with friends. We go to this place. It's called the Pacific National Exhibition. It's a fun day, and we didn't do it last year because of COVID. And now I asked her, I said, there might be a chance, there just might be a chance that we might be able to do that this year. And that brought a sense of release and excitement. So I think that all of us need to think about what can we do to lessen that stress and pressure, because you're under pressure. I'm under pressure. We're all under pressure. We're tired of that, tired of it. We're tired of not just COVID, but we're getting tired of Zoom. Man, I get zoomed out. I had 2 meetings yesterday, Zoom meetings, and then I'm teaching, and I taught on Monday for 2 classes, and I'm teaching today for 2 classes. I don't teach on tomorrow, but I teach 1 class on Friday for 3 hours. And my body is sore. I will go out and take a pill after this just to loosen up my body. I'm going to go for a walk just to loosen it up. All of us are there. So that's a question for you to think about. And you know, the reason I raise this is because it does connect with our topic about self-talk. We'll come to that in a moment. So here's another set of questions for you to think about. You don't have to write them down. You don't even have to do them. We're not going to talk about them. But you might want to think about this. How do you feel when you are praised? When somebody says something very encouraging to you? Whatever that is. The second question is, how do you feel when you are scorned or you are criticized? And those things happen in life. You know that. Some of us are more sensitive to it than others. And a question I have related to those two questions are, how do you feel when you're praised or scorned each? Who does this to you more often, others or yourself? Now, what I mean by that is, do you feel better? Do you give yourself praise? And do you give yourself or criticism? Do you do both, or one and not the other? And how about others? Do they do it? Who does it more? Do you talk to yourself more and praise yourself, or scorn or negatively evaluate yourself? So those are a couple questions to think about. They're good questions to think through, especially in public speaking. Here's another 2 questions that kind of go together. What is one of your greatest strengths? And we're not going to ask you to share that. Seriously, what's one of your greatest strengths? You should write that down. Not just one. I mean, you probably have more than one, but what is one of your greatest strengths? Whatever that is. Whatever is that? And then to write the others, what's one of your limitations that you have? We all have limitations. Nobody has it all. Nobody's perfect in everything. And the question that kind of goes with those two questions, what gets more press time in your mind? What gets more focus? Your greatest strengths or your greatest limitation, or one of your great limitations? And please hear this again. You do not have everything. I don't have anything. I don't have remotely everything. I have limitations. I have strengths, but I have limitations. We all do. And so that's an important question to be asking. In light of the topic we're going to be talking about, these are important questions. How do you feel when you're praised or scorned? And what is one of your greatest strengths? What is one of your greatest limitations? I think those are important questions to sit back and ask ourselves. And what on those greatest strengths or greatest limitations, which one gets more press time in your mind? Which one do you think about more than any other? One last question here that relates directly with our topic. How, on a scale of 1 to 10, how does your self-talk encourage you? And how does your self-talk discourage you? Okay, and we'll be looking at not those questions, but we'll be looking at this topic of self-talk. And they're very important topics for us to seriously consider as we realize that, you know what? We realize that this is a reality of our lives. It's a reality of our lives. It's a reality of our personal communication. Do you know that you talk to yourself more than anyone else? You're thinking, processing. You're quietly talking to yourself. Do you know that we spend more than 50% of our communication talking to ourselves? It's called intrapersonal communication. It's a very significant area of our lives. It's thought processing. It is thinking within ourselves. Do you know that we can affirm ourselves? I'm not talking about being arrogant and saying we're the greatest thing that ever has been born. I don't mean that. That's really not affirming yourself. That's being arrogant. But we can affirm ourselves. And to do that, we need to give ourselves some encouragement. But we can also condemn ourselves. We can condemn ourselves. See, affirming ourselves means giving ourselves encouragement. It does not mean lying and not facing reality. You can't do everything perfectly, or you cannot do everything as well or better than everybody else. None of us. That's why we need each other. So how well do you affirm yourself, and what do you do in condemning yourself? And we do both. Sometimes we're not even cognizant that we do it, but we do. It's part of that big area of conversation that we have with ourselves. We can use self-talk to either conquer challenges or be defeated, or defeat our possibilities. To conquer challenges or defeat our possibilities. I think I mentioned to you, maybe I didn't, when I was doing my doctoral degree at Oregon State University, I knew I was going into, this is there's a bachelor's degree, then a master's degree, then a doctoral degree. And I realized that this was going to be more difficult and challenging, and it was. I spent 4 years working on my doctoral degree. And I had to use self-talk in a positive way to conquer the challenge of what I was facing. It wasn't an easy job. It was going to be challenging. In fact, I was in a seminar and we had a guest speaker, and there's about 40 students in the class. And he said, look around here, statistically speaking, and we're all doctoral students, we're all working on a doctorate. He said, basically in North America, between 7 to 8% only who start a doctoral degree complete it. And I remember thinking, wow, in this classroom, that means roughly 4 out of the 40-ish will actually complete it, statistically speaking. And so I had to stop and realize that I was going to have to champion my cause. And various ways I did that. Certainly I did it with prayer. I certainly did it by being a person conscientious with my work. I did it by getting to know my professors. All those things were important. But there was one little practice I did probably about once a month, not often. I'd be in a class with students, and the students would leave, and there would be maybe another class. There wouldn't be another class coming the next hour in that classroom usually. And I would sit in the classroom or be standing in the classroom for a few minutes. I'd put all my books and stuff together. I was ready to go. And what I did is I went to the blackboard or the whiteboard, depending what classroom, and I would print my name, Curtis, C-U-R-T-I-S, my middle initial, L, period, my last name, Congo, C-O-N-G-O. I'd put that name there. Then I would put a semicolon behind the word Congo, my last name. And then I would write these initials, capital E, small d, period, capital D, period. Educational doctorate. You know, like you go see a doctor, it's an MD, medical doctor. Well, I'm an educational doctor. And I'd look at that. And then after a few minutes, I'd write the letters D, capital D, small r in front of my first name, Dr. Curtis L. Congo. I didn't do that to be arrogant. I did that to keep saying to myself, that is why I'm here. That is why I'm here. I am here to achieve that. I'm here to achieve that. Now, I didn't do that to be arrogant. I did that to keep my focus. No matter how challenging life is, no matter how challenging getting this doctorate is, I must not quit. Because only, according to that prof, only 7 or 8% who start finish. I planned on finishing. It's necessary and it's valuable to have self-talk. But there are enemies of self-talk. And it can impact us. And that's why we need to look at this. And I'm looking at it now because some of the comments I received from the evaluations of the first speech that was given. And so I want to talk about the 10 self-talks that are important for all of us to think about. Okay. And by the way, you all have this PowerPoint already. You do have this PowerPoint. I sent you all the PowerPoints, and this is about number 13 or something like that. So I want to talk about, these are traps. These are things that hurt you. These are things to be thinking about when you're giving your speech or before you're preparing to give your speech, as you develop your speech and even giving your speech. And here they are. The first self-talk trap is an all or nothing thinking. You see things black or white in black or white categories. If a situation is anything less than perfect, you see it as a total failure. Black and white. If I didn't do absolutely everything successful, I failed. Now the reality is that's not reality. The reality is that we all are humans and we all are not perfect. None of us are perfect. Only God is perfect. We are not perfect. We're human beings. We may think we've done well, and we probably have done well and stuff, but we haven't done something always perfectly. We are human. The human reality is a part of what we have to live with. So please understand, you can't look at your speech as you give it and look at it in black and white and say, I totally failed. You have to analyze. There are things to work on, of course, and I'm going to evaluate your speech. I'm going to let you know. And you might even be a little miffed thinking, I thought I did better than that. But understand something. I am the person who's been teaching. This is my 39th year of teaching this course. I have taught it so many times. I know the principles that are critical, and that's why we focus on certain ones to try to develop you. But even in any speech, there's always room for improvement. I have yet to hear the perfect speech. I've heard great speeches, excellent speeches, but no one speech that have I been live and watched to evaluate was perfect with absolutely no errors. Simply because there's a human being giving the speech and we're not perfect in and of ourselves. So the all or nothing can be a trap to think that if it's not perfect, then it's a total failure. Listen, some of us are prone to being perfectionists. That hurts your cause because none of us are perfect. By the way, before I continue, I just need to make sure you can see my PowerPoints, correct? Can you see my PowerPoints?
Yeah, we can.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. All or nothing. Second real major self-talk trap is overgeneralization. You see a single event as a never-ending pattern of defeat. You use words such as always and never when you think about it. So you get caught up by, again, it's a bit of a perfectionist thing, but we overgeneralize. I always make a mistake. I always seem to stutter at this point. I always forget to look into the camera as I'm speaking. I never, ever remember. You use these statements as overgeneralization. All or never are pretty powerful words. It means you always don't or you never do. The reality is that we often do and we don't realize it, or we never do something when it should never be done. You see, we need to understand that overgeneralization is very, very harmful in regard to our personal development. Be careful. Be careful about saying that. Don't say to yourself as you're about to give your speech things such as, you know what, if this isn't perfect, it's not worth doing. Don't say I always make a mistake. I never remember. That's a generalization that's too strong. Mental filter is another self-talk trap. You pick out a single negative detail and dwell on it exclusively. One word of criticism erases all the praise you've received. Be careful of that one. Please, when I teach this course, every one of you, I can find a mistake that you did. Believe me, I can find them. And you can find them in me because we're not perfect. The fact is, we got to be careful that when we hear a negative statement, that we don't let that become all we focus on. The mental filter says, my prof said I got 1 wrong out of 10. Oh, that's terrible. How could I get 1 wrong? My shattered nerves. If you could go through life getting 9 out of 10 right on everything, you will do incredibly well. In fact, if you can get 9 out of 10 right on everything, I want you to become my financial planner. That means that 9 out of 10 times when you make a suggestion to me, I'm going to go with it because 9 out of 10 times it's going to work and I'm going to make a whole lot more money. The fact is that it's a perfectionist issue again. How can anybody give me the negative? That's so painful. Oh, that hurts. You can't do everything well. There's so much to learn in public speaking. And my job is to teach you the science so you can begin to develop the art and become better at it over time. And you will still have to learn about public speaking past this course as far as getting up, growing and developing in it. Discounting the positive. You reject positive experiences by insisting they don't count. If you do a good job, you tell yourself anybody could have done it that well. Don't discount what you do well. Don't be arrogant to think you do everything well. And equally, don't discount things that you do that actually are positive. Now, when you do that, that means that you will never reach a level of becoming excellent. And you can be that. Excellent teachers, excellent speakers still make mistakes, subtle sometimes that they are. They're still there. A, 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 a speaker who's world renowned at some point probably will go like, well, the moment that person says, that means the speech is no longer perfect. So don't discount the positive that you've done. Appreciate that. I had a student last semester for the first time ever, and I'm my 39th year, wrote a challenge to a speech evaluation that I gave. And this student was a good student. In fact, this student got a B+ in my course. So she was very capable, but she was very upset because she wanted to get A's. But quite frankly, her speeches were never an A or A-. Good speeches, absolutely. And so she sent off a challenge to my supervisor. And my supervisor, I sent to him a speech that was in the A's. This was a woman. So I sent a speech in my class that was an A- speech. And I said, this is what an A- speech looks like. And the professor could see the difference. He said, yeah, there is definitely a difference there. I do see that. Now, so she was upset because she didn't get all excellence. She didn't get any excellence. She got all goods and averages, and she ended up with a B+ in the course, ultimately. Jumping to conclusions. A person interprets things negatively when there are no facts to support their conclusions. Sometimes they do mind reading and conclude that someone is reacting negatively to them. Or they do fortune telling. They assume that and predict that things will turn out badly. They jump to conclusions beforehand. Be careful of this one. I was giving a speech. It was my first speech at a church that I had not, as a teenager, had gone to. Now I was back and they asked me to preach. And I did. And there was a couple sitting over to my left in the front row. And they worked in youth work in the church. And I knew they didn't like me. And I jumped to a conclusion that my speech must be really bad based on their facial expressions. I jumped to a conclusion that was not wise. Be very, very careful of that, even when you get feedback. I had a class I was teaching on the Trinity Western campus. It was a class in adult education. And I had about 40 students in the class, of which there were 3 gals, 3 female. Yeah, there were lots of female gals. The class was pretty close to 50-50 and 20-some guys, 20-ish gals, right in that area. And there were 3 gals that kind of gave me a hard time in the class. And I can still remember them, especially one of them. And I jumped to a conclusion as I was going through this course that I wasn't that good a teacher. I was questioning whether I should ever teach again. My self-talk was negative self-talk. I was hurting myself. I remember getting the evaluation, like an envelope with the report card evaluation the students do of a course. And I remember opening that with that particular course, and I was kind of trembling because I was scared of what was going to be said. And I was stunned how strong the evaluations of my class was. Now, I don't think those gals gave me a real high evaluation, but the other students were positive about it. I jumped to a conclusion that maybe I shouldn't be teaching. Well, be careful when you're preparing a speech. Don't jump to a conclusion about being negative about how you think it's going to go, negative about what you think I'm thinking. or whatever. That can be so harmful to your speech. Another self-talk trap that hurts the situation is magnification. You see, you exaggerate the importance of your problems and shortcomings, or you minimize your desirable qualities. So on one side, you make something much bigger than it is, and the other, you make it much tinier than it is. And what do we magnify all too easily? Our problems, our shortcomings. We all have them. We all have them. And we also all have strengths. And the trouble is we tend to minimize our strengths and maximize our problems. And that can cause nothing but headaches and nothing but pain, unnecessary pain. Are there things that we got to be careful to recognize that we have challenges that we got to work on? And we have to recognize that there's some areas that we think we're good at, we may not be. So magnification or minimization can be a major issue, can be a problem. So be careful that you don't magnify your problems and shortcomings. We all have them. The reality is that a lot of times the magnification we give of our certain things about ourselves, other people don't even see. Don't even see it. So be careful on magnification, not making it more than in fact it is. Emotional reasoning. Emotional reasoning. You assume that your negative emotions reflect the way things really are. You know, I feel guilty. I must be a rotten person. The fact is that we go with the emotional reasoning. Always think about this. Reasoning starts from facts, not strictly emotions. In public speaking, it's a challenge. You're developing a speech. You're out there. You're presenting yourself. You're the one standing up. Everybody in the audience are glad you're up front and not them. I mean, public speaking is in North America considered the number one fear of North Americans, probably the world round. And people are much more happier listening to somebody speak than being the speaker. Now, I love being a speaker. Now, when you become a person who does it lots, you actually enjoy it. It's great, it's powerful. But we allow our emotion, and I do. There are times I go away and say, that was a terrible class, or that was a terrible speech I gave. Any number of things. And it creates all sorts of painful moments. So we need to be careful about emotional reasoning. It's very, very easy to become negative. We need to sit back and say, what are the facts? What are the facts? Okay? Evaluate yourself being objective and not subjective as much as you possibly can. Now, I'm not saying come to conclusions that are erroneous, such as I'm the greatest speaker that this world has ever experienced. That's arrogance. Don't do that. But be very, very careful that you aren't negative unnecessarily on yourself. By the way, I wrote to some of you, I don't know about in this class, but some of my classes, I have 3 sections of this class, and said, in regard to their initial review of it, I said, you know, you've really raised some good stuff about yourself. That's helpful, but you are being somewhat ultra negative about yourself. Be careful about that. You can't be perfect. Please don't think that I sit and watch your speech 5 or 6 times, looking at every way you pronounce every word. Sometimes I do go back and look at sections again. I don't mean that. But there's only so much time. And so I'm watching it as if I were in the crowd, listening to you, and I'm evaluating as you're speaking. I'm paying a lot of attention at that level. Here's another one, number 8, the should statements. You tell yourself that things should be the way you hoped or expected them to be. Many people try to motivate themselves with shoulds and should nots as if they had to be punished before they could be expected to do anything. Should statements or should not statements. You need to be careful about those. Now, it's important to evaluate yourself. It's important to be objective. It's important to see the strengths and the importance of realizing there are things you can do to be better. Absolutely. That's necessary. But be very careful about everything you say. I should have done this. I shouldn't have said that. I'm going on and on. I should have remembered to put this in my speech. I should have whatever. Those sort of things after the speech is given can demoralize you. Are there some shoulds and should nots? Yes, of course there are. Listen, you and I are humans. We're going to say things. We're going to forget things. We're human. I'm not saying you want to do that a lot. And do remember this, when you're giving a speech and there's something you thought you should have said, but you forgot to say, the audience doesn't know. They don't know what you have on paper that you're going to say. So move on. Yes, certainly work on being better the next time, but be very careful not to get so caught up with the should and the should nots that you actually kind of destroy yourself. That's not going to help your situation at all. So be careful with the should statements and the should not statements. They can be very, very harmful when you are speaking. I've been there. Even yesterday, I was in a meeting. In fact, I got like a sheet of paper right here. These are the notes from an hour and a half professional development day that we had with a woman who spoke on the flourishing professor. She did a good job. It's very beneficial. And then we broke into groups for a few minutes and came back, and I said something and thought, I wish I hadn't have said it that way. I should have said it this way. Well, you know what? The 12 people, 15 people that were in the group that I was with, they didn't know. In fact, they're not sitting home. They're not sitting at their offices. They're all professors thinking, man, you know what he should have said is this. They're not thinking that way at all. So kind of relax. Give yourself a bit of a break. Labeling. This is an extreme form of all or nothing thinking. Instead of saying, I made a mistake, you attach a negative label to yourself. I'm a loser. Be careful with that. Words are powerful. You know that. We've talked about, or we are going to talk about words. We've talked a little bit about it. Words are powerful. Your words say something, mean something. By the way, when you speak, don't think that you might not impact my person. When you speak in front of an audience, you do not know what they're dealing with. Okay, so you need to understand that words are powerful, and how we talk to ourselves and we label ourselves are impacting. If you keep saying to yourself, I'm a loser, I'm pathetic, I stink when it comes to public speaking, you're going to become what you're describing, because you're going to so demoralize yourself, you're not going to feel any energy in giving your presentation. And that kills a speech really fast. You don't want to go into a speech saying things that are harmful to you. You want to go into a speech speaking in a way that's beneficial. You know what? You made a mistake. That doesn't make you a loser. It makes you a learner. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all going to learn from them. I have spent 39, this is my 39th year of teaching. 39 years. I will, at the end of April, will have been teaching 39 years. Okay? I've made mistakes. I've even said to myself, you are a loser. And I've realized all I've done is hurt myself. Now, I can't be arrogant by saying, you wonderful person, you're so phenomenal. I don't say that either. But I am careful to recognize, I am so careful to recognize that when I start labeling myself with negative words all the time, I begin to believe I am what I'm labeling myself for or with. There is almost nobody more powerful, human-wise, in this world in impacting you than yourself. say negative things, you become to believe that's what you are. Listen, there's not a single person sitting in this classroom right now with me here, plus all the people who are watching this later, because I am recording this and I send it out in either today or tomorrow. Okay, if you're listening to this, you have incredible capacity and capability. I personally believe God exists, and I believe God gave you, who made you in his image, I believe God gave you incredible possibilities. And so labeling yourself in a negative way hurts. Now, I think you have to be honest. If you really didn't do good preparation, you need to be able to say to yourself, I did not prepare well. That is unacceptable. That's not negative. That's actually a positive evaluation. The last one is personalization and blame. Personalization and blame. You hold yourself personally responsible for events that aren't entirely under your control. You hold yourself personally responsible for everything. And that is dangerous because you do not have control of everything. You do not have control of if people choose to listen or not listen. They may make a choice to not listen to you. That's their mistake. Now, you have to do everything you can to help people listen to you. Absolutely. We've talked about listening. But if they make a choice not to listen to you, that is their problem. You cannot take it on. And there are times when we will actually do that. We will hold ourselves responsible as if we have control of everything. How do you have control of the people sitting there with a child that's making fussing and maybe crying and making it hard while you're giving your speech for people to listen? You don't have control of them. You only have control of yourself, and you have to really focus on your audience at that point. Okay? So be aware that you do not have control of everything at all. You cannot be personally responsible for things and decisions other people have made. So there are the 10 kind of the top factors that need to be thought about. Now, we need to be able to respond to negative self-talk. We need to be able to respond to self-talk. And we need to realize we need to first capture our own self-talk. We need to pay attention to ourselves. We need to be very conscious of ourselves. We need to evaluate ourselves. And there are things that we need to say to ourselves. We need to work on developing this better. That's not negative self-talk. That's being objective in evaluation. So, here's something you could do that begins to help you think about this. Randomly throughout your day, stop and ask yourself, what am I saying to myself right now? All of a sudden you realize you're talking to yourself. What am I saying? Get a piece of paper out and write it down. What am I saying? Writing down that thought. Now you've captured it because you put it on paper. We need to understand that the use of uncomfortable emotions or moods, such as stress, depression, and anxiety, should be taken into consideration as cues for listening to our own self-talk. So when we experience different emotions or moods, stress, depression, anxiety, we need to be listening to ourselves. We need to identify the feeling we have. We need to identify, what was I saying to myself right before I started feeling this way? If you ever all of a sudden start thinking negative things, what were you thinking just before? That may be a clue as to why you're thinking that negative thought. You need to use a cue such as, what have I been saying to myself since I've been feeling this way? See, if you keep walking around saying, I'm a pathetic public speaker, I can't do public speaking, I'm not going to do well. Well, what should you expect to be your thinking? What should you expect in the future for you? You're thinking you're programming yourself negatively. When you are aware of going through a difficult time, check what you are saying to yourself at those times. Okay, at those points, pay attention. It's important, it's valuable, it's helpful. Now, here's some things that are beneficial to responding to negative self-talk. Identify the negative self-talk. I've given you the 10 traps. Sit back and say, what trap was this? Whatever it is. If you're saying I'm always unorganized, I'm always nervous, I never completely share everything I wanted to say. See, those words never and always tell you right away what the self-trap is. Okay? It's not very hard. Argue with yourself. When you hear yourself talking about something and it's all negative, argue with yourself. If you might think, okay, I think I'm a very unlikable person. Well, you might want to argue yourself. Well, if I'm such an unlikable person, why do my old friends call me up to get together? You're arguing with yourself. You're taking yourself on. It's a good thing to do. Another thing that you can do is change your inner dialogue that is flawed. Change your inner dialogue that is flawed. State things accurately and rationally. Be careful not to be excessively positive, because that usually distorts truth. Be careful not to be excessively negative. That equally distorts truth. Change your inner dialogue, which is flawed. State things accurately. Okay? Make sure you do that. For instance, my inner dialogue says I never come across being organized. State things accurately and rationally by saying, you know what, I am organized. There are things I can do to improve. Actually, my sermon did, my speech did flow well. Okay, change your inner dialogue. Can you improve? Of course. Listen, I have people in professional work where they give speeches every week, have had me listen and watch one of their speeches. Or else I've been in there and they said, look, could you evaluate? And I have my evaluation form, the same evaluation form I'm going to be sending you. And I go through it from a logistical perspective. And I try to help them see things they can do. And you know what? There are good things that they did. It's very encouraging to tell them, man, this was really good. Okay? So change your inner dialogue that is flawed. Ask for help from a friend. That's exactly what I've had from somebody who asked me to come and to really talk about their presentation. What could have I done that would have been helpful? I had a friend who was involved in Seattle, in Washington, where he gave speeches every week, and they were recorded. He asked me once every 3 months, take one out, evaluate it, and then send it to me. And then he said this, if you can't find one thing I need to do to improve, you are not helping me. So don't always ask somebody that's just going to say, oh, you're such a wonderful person. You want a person that's going to be objective, but caring. Ask for help from a friend. You're talking about a negative thing about yourself, and you might say, you know what, I think this way about my speech that you listen to. So I want to ask you something. Do you think that I am whatever the issue your concern is? I let the person give you feedback. I suspect you're going to surprise the person when you share certain things. Another thought that I do, and I kind of do this, I really find this helpful. Write down your thoughts. And here's how I do it. Think of a piece of paper with a column. in column run, number 1, what is your thought? The automatic thought that comes to you. Here's one. I always do lousy in my job interviews. Let's just say that was something you struggled with, you think. The second column is the categorizing. Well, what category of the 10 negative self-talks would I always do lousy in my job interviews? Well, that's overgeneralization. The word always is a dead giveaway when you use that one. So then talking to yourself, here's what you can do. You can give yourself a rebuttal, which means is to challenge yourself. So stop and think. Well, you know what? I did answer all the questions that was asked of me in the interview, but I did I did leave out some things that I really thought important. And you know what? Next time I'm going to include those. Now that's a healthy approach. What is the issue? I always do lousy in job interviews. What category is that? Overgeneralization. But well, what's a rebuttal? Well, you know what? I don't always do as bad as I'm making myself out to have done in job interviews. Maybe this one wasn't as strong as I felt I should be. I did mention the answers to the questions they asked. I could have brought this into the picture. Whatever it is, argue with yourself. Change your inner dialogue. Ask for help from a friend. Write down your thoughts. Those are all such big, major helps in public speaking. Now, I'm a follower of God, and I read the Bible and I pray. I think that's important. And you may find that beneficial to spend time asking God for help. Okay. And God will definitely help you. So be sure to take some time in your time preparing speeches to think about your self-talk. Don't go into a speech saying to yourself before it, I'm not a good public speaker. I don't do well. I hate it. I'm not going to enjoy this. I'm doing it because I'm in this course and Congo's going to be grading me. No, don't say that. Say to them yourself, you know what? Public speaking is a challenge, but I am in here to do the best I can. That's what I did with my doctorate degree. I was in here. I ended up getting my grade point average ended up being 3.94. So I did fine. But what I did is I went away from negative self-talk about, I don't know why I'm doing this, to I'm here, and I wrote in the chalkboard. And it was a positive self-talk, and it reinforced things. Instead of saying I'm going to do terrible, I wrote my initials behind my name because that's what I was there for. That led me. So when you're giving a speech and you're preparing it, say to yourself, instead of I'm going to do terrible, I don't like doing this, say to yourself, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to do the best I can. I know I'm going to do okay. No, I don't know if I'll get an A, but I'm not here just to get A's. I am here to learn. I'm here to become a good public speaker. I'm here to be able to learn the science of public speaking so I can continue developing the art of public speaking, how I speak using the principles, the science, and being effective. And you know what? I'm not going to be negative about myself. I think I can do it. I'm arguing with myself. And I think I've got the abilities. I'm changing my inner dialogue. I'm going to recognize that, you know what, the last speech, I could do things better, but I'm going to work on that right now. This is what this course is about, to learn how to speak. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to talk to a friend and say, hey, I'd like you to watch this speech with me, or I'd like to ask you, I sometimes struggle with, how do you see that? Write down your thoughts. Boy, there's power in writing down thoughts about yourself on paper. You're here to become different. You are here simply because you actually want to become better at what you're doing. And you realize that you need to learn to do that. Fact is, students are really wanting to be transformed. You want to grow. You just don't want the BA degree behind your name. Yes, you want that, and good for you. But you want to develop, and you're going to be giving presentations in this world. This won't be the only time you do this. You'll be doing it again. Therefore, why don't you take time to develop your abilities right from the beginning, the get-go, and be ready to do the best possible job you can. So the next speech is coming up. You're giving a speech that's informative, and we're going to be looking at that a little bit later. And what I want you to do is to think about how can I mentally prepare myself as I have to deal with COVID-19 and it's mentally exhausting. How can I do things that improves my capacity to be even better? I want you to be able to do that. Well, that's the end of my talk, and I'm just going to shut down this to you who are watching this recording. I hope you take this to heart. Have a good day.